everybody. Just recently I caused a great disturbance in the force with my video on 5 reasons why I believe owning a Ferrari is better than a Porsche. But today I am playing the role of Automotive Anakin Skywalker as I aim to bring balance with this video. 5 reasons why I believe owning a Porsche is better than a Ferrari. Before we get started proper, a couple of community notices. You might not recognise the car that I'm in. It belongs to Centre Gravity, the lovely suspension gurus who've currently got my 430 Scuderia in for another little bit of remedial work. As that's going to take a little bit longer than anticipated, they very kindly provided me with this. It's their 986 Boxster S track car, complete with the 987 specification Bilstein adaptive dampers. Essentially the same as you'd find on a sort of GT3, and it's been set up in a very hardcore manner. Though, I've got to say, it's actually a very pleasant car on the road too. Long-term viewers of the channel may be wondering why I'm not doing this video in my own Boxster, well, more accurately, that belongs to my other half. However, that I've loaned to a friend who's been using it for all sorts of stuff over the last few months, and I've got to say, I really must get that back at some point. However, he's been thoroughly enjoying it, and I've got plenty of other cars to be dealing with, so that's why you haven't heard from it, though I do intend to make some content with it fairly soon. The final thing then to say before we get started is this video is sponsored by CarVertical. So regardless of whether you're looking for a 356 or a GT3, their search will help you uncover potentially hidden facts about whatever it is you're looking at, including accident damage, mileage discrepancies, usage as a taxi, as unlikely as that may be, outstanding finance, previous fire or theft, and a whole bunch of other useful stuff too. It takes just 60 seconds and all you need is a registration or VIN number. And don't forget, for 10% off the service, use my discount code JAYEMM. So then, on to the video proper. And what's point number 1? Well, I've hinted at it already, it's balance. Because I think not only is this actually a very balanced chassis, but the Porsche brand itself also strikes a beautiful balance between that of more mainstream manufacturers like BMW, Mercedes, Audi, and the more exotic ones like McLaren, Ferrari, Lamborghini. You see, they have the nice elements you get from a mass-manufactured car. They generally work a little bit better. They'll have slightly more up-to-date features, infotainment, all that sort of stuff. These cars will have things in them that Ferrari's engineers can only dream about, yet any buyer of a Ford, Vauxhall, or even the likes of Alfa Romeo would simply expect. I recall the first time I got in a Maserati being absolutely amazed at the fact it had the feature where if you click the indicators once, it'll give you 3 flashes. That's the sort of stuff I'm talking about. If you do want to use your car on a daily basis, a Porsche is generally just going to be a slightly easier thing to live with. From small stuff like the fact that this car has buttons for both of the boots, and the remote works from more than just 2 feet away, to other stuff like the fact you've got generous service intervals, lower servicing costs, all that sort of stuff, and we will of course talk about pricing a little bit more later on. And on the topic of balance, I think these are cars that work both as daily drivers for those who want to enjoy them all year round, or as something they reserve for the weekends or when the day is right, you're in the mood and everything else. They are to me worthy enough of using in small quantities, savouring the experience, but also decent enough that should you want to pile the miles on, they shouldn't fall apart. And that, I think, is a very good thing indeed. The simple fact is that owning the vast majority of Porsches is just no less inconvenient than, say, a BMW, Mercedes, or Audi equivalent. And I just cannot say that for Ferrari. And now, for my second trick, I'm going to take one of the negatives from my first video and turn it into a positive. That's the one where I said I prefer owning a Ferrari because they are a rarer and more special thing. And that certainly is true. However, there is of course a flip side to this, which is that a Porsche is certainly a far more common thing. They have a much greater quantity of not just individual models, but also cars in general. And this is fantastic because it means, first off, you could own a number of Porsches and I think they'd have a little bit more variety to them than an equivalent number of Ferraris. I think often Ferrari don't get the credit they maybe deserve for having the breadth of range they currently do, with the likes of, say, the Roma Spider, the 296 and the recently departed A12, all delivering a very different flavour of driving experience. However, then look at Porsche and you've got the Boxster, the Cayman, the 911, the Macan, the Cayenne, the Panamera and the Taycan. You could quite happily build an entire fleet out of the current Porsche range, and I think you'd be able to cater for just about every conceivable taste, from the school run to the Nürburgring. There being a greater quantity of cars overall also means for the used buyer, which I think is the majority of people, there are plenty to choose from, and if you're trying to find a specific model or specification combination, then hopefully you'll be able to find the car for you. And if you think you've got it, but it turns out not to be a good one, there shouldn't be any issue with saying no, because there'll almost certainly be another. And again, Ferrari, with their relatively limited numbers, quite often, if there's a specific thing you want, it may not even exist, and if it does, there might only be a couple of cars like it out there, so unless you're after a red car with cream interior and red carpets, then you might have to be a little bit more accommodating of cars that aren't exactly what you wanted. In the land of Porsche, hopefully that's going to be less of a concern. And again, because there are so many more of them out there, if you aren't able to find exactly the car that you want, you will be able to find a specialist who I'm sure can make it. The overall greater number of cars out there also means that there are more owners, therefore more owners clubs and more opportunities to do stuff with your car if you're the sort of person that likes to use it to do social stuff too. I've been to plenty of Porsche events, barbecues, meets, drives, all that sort of stuff, and you can choose from a whole host of different clubs, catering to everything, again, from extreme hardcore track day fiends to those who want to wine and dine themselves with the Porsche in the background somewhere. Point number 3, and again, this is another one where I'm going to turn things around from the previous video, and that is value for money. Because though I said in the last one that I think Ferraris actually are a little bit better than many people think, that really is only true for the more expensive end of things. Once you get to about £100,000, you've got lots of Ferraris to choose from. But conversely, I really would try very hard to steer anybody away from spending anything less than £50,000 on a Ferrari. Whereas in the land of Porsche, that'll get you a lot of car. In fact, even half that figure will get you into some genuinely fantastic machinery. Something like this, for example, a 986 Boxster. It's an absolutely fabulous car. For me, one of the best value sports cars out there, because you can pick up a decent one for under £10,000. Or to put it another painful way, less than a few of the bills I've had from Ferrari for work that's needed to be done to my cars. Though to be fair, in the next video on the Boxster that my other half and I have, you will see that even a cheap Porsche does have the capacity to cost you quite a bit. I seem now to be rattling through these points, so actually, if you don't mind, I'm going to deviate a little bit and just wax lyrical about how fantastic this 986S is. I really wish it didn't have the hardtop installed, but it's getting into winter now, and so that's understandable, particularly as it's used chiefly as a track car. But even so, I am having a great time. Naturally, the suspension setup in here is brilliant. Though it's on what centre gravity would call the firm side, actually, compared with many other Porsches I've driven, it's pretty compliant. The suspension is doing exactly what it should. And it puts such a smile on your face. The manual gearbox in this particular example is not great. It can be a lot better. But on that topic, Porsche will still sell you one in 2023, whereas Ferrari stopped, I think, in about 2013, maybe even a little bit earlier. I think it was actually the California that had the distinction of being the final Ferrari offered with that fabulous gated shifter. The engine also may have half the power of the Scuderia I've just got out of, but on a road like this, it's no trouble whatsoever. If I needed to make an overtake, you would notice it perhaps, but as I don't, it's brilliant. Loads of punch from low down, and the fact it's just that little bit less pokey means you can drive it all the harder while staying just the right side of the law. It's a great thing, this car. And in fact, that brings me on to point number 4, which is that Porsches do tend to drive brilliantly. Okay, it's not like Ferraris don't, but they've had quite a few misses, and while sure, Porsche have too, I would say maybe their success rate is a little higher. Okay, sure, in the last few years there's been a number of Porsche products that I felt have just fallen short of the benchmark that they themselves set. However, as in both of these videos I'm talking largely about historic stuff, I have to say Porsche really can at least take the fight to Ferrari, if not beat them, when it comes to fabulous drivers' cars. From the likes of the Humble, like this Boxster, or the 944, 968, and even stuff like the 356. That's a car that began life in the 40s, and when I drove it, I had very, very low expectations, but it turned out to be a cracking little thing. Then in the modern era, you've got stuff like the Cayenne, which people just wouldn't really expect to be any fun to drive, but actually is. The first generation I've got a real soft spot for, and I know that is a car a lot of people really strongly dislike, but honestly, try one, especially a turbo. It will put a smile on your face, or at least it should. Even in its current incarnation, you have the Cayenne Turbo GT, perhaps the best example out there of a car that I really shouldn't like, yet is an utter and total riot. It is wrong in so many ways, but also really quite right. I love it. If anything, the biggest disappointment in the lineup has always been the Panamera. I've only driven, I think, 2 or 3 of them, but on every occasion I've expected a little bit more than the car has managed to deliver. I've tried both the first and most recent iterations, and they've just really fell short, and that's a shame because on paper they are a perfect car for the petrolhead like myself that wants something a little bit practical, but that is also devastatingly quick, hilarious to drive, and also sort of usable. Unfortunately, it just doesn't generate the smiles that I would expect, and weirdly, get from the Cayenne. Yeah, don't know what's going on there. And now on to point 5. And the truth is, I actually could have done quite a few more of these than I did, because there's a lot to be said about both brands. I mean, I do genuinely love each of them. I should really give a big shout out to the fact that owning a Porsche is generally going to be quite a bit easier than a Ferrari, and I love the fact that they are so much better in terms of parts availability. When it comes to older stuff, more exotic cars, parts pricing is to me actually a lesser concern, because if something's expensive and you can't afford it, generally you can save and eventually you'll be able to fix that problem. But if something's just not available, well, no amount of money is going to cure that. In Ferrari land, a lot of models are plagued by this problem. But for Porsche, it's generally speaking not an issue. I know of relatively few Porsches that are off the road because they simply cannot get a hold of the parts that they need. On occasion, when I've gone to the dealer and I've needed stuff for a car that's 20 or 30 years old and it's a really weird, obscure bit, they've still been able to get it within 2 days direct from Germany. Genuinely great customer support, and there's a lot of people out there I know who probably would have a Ferrari, but their local dealer or independent is just too far away, and the model they want has a few too many things that you just can't get anymore, and so they're just worried there'll be that one silly little thing that'll ruin the whole experience. That generally doesn't happen with Porsche. I have made some absolutely fantastic friends through the brand, and I also appreciate the fact that Porsche themselves also generally get on with me, despite the fact I tend to give them quite a hard time quite frequently. It is at this point where I'd also invite all of you to hop into the comment section and join the debate. Let's keep this fire burning and tell me, why is it that you love Porsche quite so much? Have you got one that's been a love affair for decades? Is there one that you're still after? For me, it's the Carrera GT. I'd have a go in one of those over in Enzo every day of the week. It is, I think, still my ultimate dream car. One day, I really hope to be able to get the chance to drive one. Whether it'll happen or not, I really, really don't know. I hope it will, and I hope when it does happen that it won't be a disappointment. I have had a passenger ride in one. I went to get sandwiches in it in Florida, and that was really, really bizarre. Heading to a Publix in a Carrera GT. Strange experience, but such a fabulous memory. But what is this point number 5 of mine? Well, you know, I thought long and hard about it, but it's got to be the 911. It just does, doesn't it? Because let's face it, when you say Ferrari, there's a lot of cars people will think about. Maybe it's Magnum PI's 308. Maybe it's Crockett's Testarossa. Maybe it's a 355 because Jeremy Clarkson called it the greatest car in the world ever. Maybe it's a 458 Speziale because, well, just about everybody seems to love that, and annoyingly, I've never managed to have a go. However, when you mention Porsche to people, I would wager 99% of them are going to think of a 911. Because that is the Porsche, isn't it? That's the one. They have had plenty of brilliant cars, but in the 911, they have managed to achieve what Ferrari never really did. They have created an icon that has lasted for generations. You'll have a favourite 911, your dad might have a favourite 911, and your granddad might have a favourite 911. To non-Porsche people, they'll all be the same. They'll see a ropey 1960s thing exactly the same way as they do a 2023 GT3 RS. Us Porsche types, of course, we know the difference and we appreciate the subtleties between them. We love the fact there is essentially a 911 for just about everybody. In my local town, for example, there is a lady who drives a white 996 Turbo S cab that I'm pretty sure is also a Tiptronic. To most petrol heads, that's just about the weirdest combination you could ever imagine. But for her, I'm sure it's the perfect car. I think she likes it because she's had it for a good number of years now. I myself have had the good fortune to drive a great number of different 911s, and honestly, I found a lot to like in so many of them. Favourites include the 964 RS, the old Carrera Club Sport, which has to be, I think, one of the greatest surprises of my motoring journalism career, and the likes of the Banzai 991.2 GT3. That car was wild, and one of the few things on the road, I think, that can genuinely hold a candle to the likes of the 430 Scuderia. But as I said earlier, it doesn't actually need to be something particularly exotic for it also to be a great driver's car. A 997.1 is just about the least loved flavour of 911 at present, yet it's actually one of my all-time favourites. They are a bargain. If I was on the hunt for a 911, it'd probably be the one that I'd buy. What exactly it is about the 911 that makes people love it so much, I really don't know. Maybe it's a bit like certain members of the royal family. They weren't exactly well loved when they were introduced, but after a while they've been around for so long, people just get used to them and then eventually start to like them. Maybe it's that lovely combination of beautiful chassis with the 2+2 layout that means for those with new families, they can still enjoy their sports car without having to compromise all that much. And I've no doubt there's also a whole generation of people inspired by the 911's many brushes with celebrity, from the likes of Steve McQueen and his car's famous appearance in the beginning of Le Mans, to even the more modern likes of Magnus Walker, who in a sort of life-imitating art thing has become, I think, well known to many people on account of the cars that he's bought and now modifies, rather than what he actually made the money for doing, which was jeans, wasn't it? The 911 has been a dominant feature in motorsport for decades, and although Porsche dilly-dally with top-flight stuff and sometimes do it, sometimes don't, the 911 is a constant presence. It's always there. You go to a track, there will be a 911 somewhere. If it's not on the grey stuff, it's parked out the back on the green stuff. So then, there we have it. That's a brief little look at 5 reasons and a bit why I think owning a Porsche is maybe even better than owning a Ferrari. As I said in that first video, truthfully, I'm just a lover of cars, and I do know a good bit of clickbait helps get the views in, so I hope I've managed to encourage a little bit of friendly banter in the comments, maybe the odd bit of unfriendly stuff too, and you know what, we'll try and ignore them as best we can. But in any case, I hope to see you there, and as ever, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, comment if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button too, the bell icon if you don't mind, and I'll see you for the next one. Bye-bye.